during the election of chair, the clerk of the committee can only receive motions for the election of chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot entertain points of orders, nor participate in debate. We can now proceed to the election of chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 106.2, the chair must be a member of the government party. I am now ready to receive motions for the chair. Mr. Baker?
I would like to nominate Mr. Scarpaleggia for chair.
It has been moved by Mr. Yvan Baker that Mr. Scarpaleggia be elected chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Seeing no other motions, I declare Mr. Scarpaleggia duly elected chair of the committee. Congratulations. You may now take the chair, sir.
Just a point of clarification, do we have to vote on it, or is it just a motion and that's the end of it?
Well, because there was only one motion, it was by acclamation.
Okay, wonderful.
It's a little late, Peter.
Congratulations, Francis.
And before the chair gets to rule me out of order, I want to congratulate him as well. I've known Francis Scarpaleggia for many years. This is a very appropriate choice for your chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
Well, thank you, Ms. May. That's very kind of you. And indeed, we have worked together for a long time, and it's been a great honor for me. So first of all, thank you to everyone for your confidence. Merci beaucoup pour votre confiance.
Thank you very much for your confidence. It's a real pleasure to work together to make progress on these issues related to the environment.
We're at meeting number 6. And the committee is meeting today for a briefing by the Auditor General of Canada and the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of September 23rd, 2020. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So that you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French, so three channels. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. I think that's pretty standard practice. If you are on video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, please put your mic on mute. With regards to the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. We have from the Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada, Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General and Interim Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, Kimberly Leach, Principal, and James McKenzie, Principal. So my understanding is, Mr. Clerk, that we have 5 minutes for opening statements. That would include all combined, all witnesses. And we'll try to follow that rule and see how it goes. So I imagine it's Ms. Hogan who will be going first.
Thank you.
Thank-
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your recent nomination to the chair of this very important committee.
Please go ahead. Please.
Nous avons préparé des
We have prepared slides that we have shared with the committee in preparation for appearing here today. And I'd like to encourage you to keep these as a reference tool later on the mandate of my office in order to maximize the time with the committee with questions. Andrew and myself are just going to give the highlights of our presentation, and I shall start with the activities of our office, which you can find on the first slides. For over half of our legislative auditors, they are involved in the annual audits of the Government of Canada. And this includes the annual audits of several Crown corporations. And in these audits, we express our opinion on the financial situation in line with accounting standards. And another type of audit that we have is a special examination. And this is a type of performance audit within a Crown corporation. And the Act states that there should be a special examination at least once every 10 years for each parent Crown corporation.
is most familiar with are our performance audits. And so these audits look at whether the government programs are managed with due regard to economy, efficiency, and the environment. We also look at whether there are measures in place to determine if programs are effective. This is commonly referred to as auditing the 4 E's. We may comment on policy implementation in our performance audits, but we will not comment on policy itself. The Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development assists me in the areas of my mandate when they relate to the environment and sustainable development. All of our performance audit work, whether it is issued under the banner of the Auditor General or the Commissioner of the Environment, follows the same planning, execution, and selection processes, as well as the same standards for quality. Many of our performance auditors enjoy the mobility of working on any one of our performance audit products. I will now hand it over to Andrew, the Interim Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, and he can discuss a bit more of some of the other work that we do with respect to sustainable development strategies and the petitions process. Andrew?
Thank you very much. So I'm pleased to be here today. As Ms. Hogan mentioned, my role is to support her in the work that she has to do for her mandate that relates to environment and sustainable development. Each year, I have the privilege of submitting an annual report for tabling with Parliament. And in that annual report, there will be a commentary on the petitions process, which is a process that is available for residents of Canada to ask questions of an environmental matter in the nature of sustainable development and to receive a response directly from a minister. To date, there have been between 26 and 27 departments and agencies that have been subject to the petitions process. In the future, at the beginning of December, that will become almost 100 because of the amendments to the Federal Sustainable Development Act last year. In addition, in my annual report, I have to comment on sustainable development strategies and the progress that departments and agencies have made in support of the Federal Sustainable Development Strategies goals and targets. In terms of the scope of that work, again, it was at one point 26 27 departments and agencies at the beginning of December. Again, that's going to rise to about 100. You will also see in my annual report audit reports that look very similar to the ones that are presented by the Auditor General periodically. And from time to time, we can have one or two in the annual report, but we've also been privileged in the past to be able to table a separate report, taking one of the Auditor General's periodic reports for the purposes of tabling environmental and sustainable development audits. As a final point, I would mention that in terms of the mandate that I have, over the 25 years of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, we have seen many audits of environmental matters. Over the last few years, building on the work of our previous Commissioner, Julie Gelfand, we have been expanding the work in the area of sustainable development. And in particular, the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations have provided us with an absolutely incredible lens through which to look at the activities and progress that government makes in those areas. With that, I think I might leave the slides because you do have some information there about our priorities and our upcoming audits, which I suspect might be better covered during questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for your presentations. So now we will go on to a question and answer session. And of course, we'll start with the first round of 6 minutes each. And we will start with Madame Cousy for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you to the witnesses. And I would like to thank Mr. Dan Albus, the leader of my team, for the opportunity to be here today.
Today are relevant to Report 1, and I will also indicate that this information was communicated in a letter to the chair of the committee, of which I am vice chair, Tran, T-R-A-N, and so this information is specific relative to Report 1 and that letter. So my first question for the Auditor General and her team is that within the follow-up audit, you examined a sample of 60 violations in fiscal year 2018-2019 and found that in 18 of those 60 violations that you could not, or pardon me, Transport Canada could not verify that companies took corrective action. And this is a result in an effort to return to compliance. And this is a result of 3 possible scenarios. Number 1, Transport Canada did not follow up with companies to obtain the required evidence. Situation number 2 was that they did not conclude whether violations were resolved despite companies having submitted the required evidence, that they took the corrective actions and addressed the violations. And situation 3 was the conclusion that companies had returned to compliance. However, the documentation was not received in an effort to support the conclusion, a very important part of an audit, as always. So within the first 2 situations where there was no follow-up or no conclusion, was it the department that did not have an adequate system in place to follow up on those violations, or was there a system in place that was not being applied? And my second question relevant to my first question is, what information was the department using to conclude that companies were returning to compliance? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So in our report, we noted that the Department of Transport had established a risk-based system for identifying the inspections that it would do. However, we also found that the information upon which it based its decisions was not always accurate and valid. In terms of the examples that you raised and the violations, ultimately, I would say that we found that the department wasn't following up on the incidents of violations that had been identified in previous reviews by the department. Ultimately, I will ask my colleague Kim Leach to give a bit more detail. But what I would say is that in terms of the situations where there was no evidence that that violations had been resolved, or where the department had reached a conclusion that they were resolved without information, that is at a fundamental level, a failure to keep and monitor the documentation. Kim, would you like to add to that at all?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for the question. Yes, so, you're referring to paragraph 30 in report number 1 of the report that we tabled on October 27th, of course. And, clearly, the evidence showed that of 60 violations, 18 of them in our sample, that companies were not returned to corrective action. And part of the issue, and you pointed out the several instances in which.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. If you don't mind, I think I'll move on to my next question, as I feel you are repeating some of the facts, and I do have other questions to ask. Thank you so
There
much.
was nothing in the file is the answer.
Oh, super. Thank you.
Okay.
My next question, Mr. Chair and dear witnesses, is that it was also found in the audit that Transport Canada did not routinely collect data from provinces and territories which share responsibility with Transport Canada for monitoring compliance for the transportation of dangerous goods by road. Why did this occur? Why was this data from provinces and territories not routinely collected? Thank you.
So the answer to that question is that there are agreements in place with the provinces and one of the territories. It is for Transport Canada, in our view, to follow up with those provinces and territories to collect the information. The reasons for not following up would be best answered by the department. In our view, they have the tools to be able to collect that information.
Okay, so they do have the tools. Thank you. All right, then I just have a minute left, so I'll go to my last question. I think most relevant and pertinent to this committee, which I'm at today, is that Transport Canada's performance of meeting Goal 3 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, specifically Target 3.9, which is to substantially reduce the number of deaths and illnesses from hazardous chemicals with air, water, and soil pollution contamination by 2030. But in fact, the department was not meeting its target of 2%. And in fact, even there was an increase. So how has the department determined that they will now work towards meeting these targets? And why wasn't Transport Canada able to meet these targets, please?
You have about 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did identify in the report that there had been a change to the way that they evaluated and included instances in their list of the rate of reporting dangerous goods releases. Nevertheless, they still did not meet the target. So I do believe that the department is aware and will take, they've committed to take action to reduce that.
Merci. Alors on passe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madame Kuzi. So now we've got Mr. Schiefke. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you to our guests today. I'll turn to the Commission of Environment and Sustainable Development. One of the priorities of the Commissioner is to evaluate risks associated with climate change, and specifically, there's work that's been identified by the Commissioner for the future funding, adaptation and mitigation measures. This is a priority that's shared by my citizens in Vaudreuil-Soulanges. We've had 2 historic floods since 2017, and there's lots of questions about mitigation of risk. It's a crucial question for us. So the question is the following. Could the Commissioner explain how these factors are included in the audits? Thank you. Thank you for that question. We have carried out audits on climate change in 2017, and then there was a collaborative report with many of the provinces in 2018. And we've also carried out audits in the territories and the central subjects. I'm afraid the speaker has switched off his mic. We've just lost you for a moment, sir. Am I back again? Thank you. So the relevant subjects related to climate change are some of our core priorities for future audits. I could say that we're going to produce a report with some audits on climate change in 2022, in fact. Thank you.
What I have is with regards to international cooperation. In the presentation we received, it's noted that the Commissioner for Environment and Sustainable Development works with auditors in numerous other countries around the world to assess preparedness and implementation for the 2030 SDG agenda. Achieving the SDGs is an incredibly important component for ensuring a fairer and more sustainable world, something that I agree wholeheartedly with, something that's been shared with me by many of my constituents in Vaudreuil-Soulanges. And I'm wondering, could the Commissioner please provide more details about the role of implementing the SDGs and the recent international work with regard to preparedness?
Yes, thank you very much. I will ask Ms. Leach to expand on this because Ms. Leach and our former Commissioner Julie Gelfand have been leading or had been leading work together to support the development of auditing and on the topic of the SDGs. And I would say that honestly, Canada is a leader in that respect because of the work that Ms. Leach and Ms. Gelfand have done on that. So, so Ms. Leach, would you like to add to that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayes and Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. Yes, so in 2016, our International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, that's the organization where all auditors general in the world belong, they developed a strategic plan which said that all auditors around the world, all Supreme Audit institutions should help the UN monitor and assess and measure the progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So in fact, we've been doing this since 2016, and we've done 2 government-wide audits. We're actually presently in the middle of a government-wide audit that's looking at the implementation of the SDGs. That will be tabled in the spring. In 2018, we tabled an audit that looked at the preparedness of our government to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. We looked at 7 things, and the results of that audit were not good. We have been to this committee to speak to that audit in the past. But so we are currently doing a government-wide audit on this that will look at the extent to which our recommendations from 2018 have been implemented and how government is doing on implementation. The other thing that we do in our office is all audits in our office, all performance audits, whether they're related to health or defense or it's not just environmental audits, but all audits need to take the Sustainable Development Goals into account in the work that they do. So we're quite proud of that.
And I will I'll just add that the work that Ms. Leach and Ms. Gelfand have done have allowed other international auditors general to be prepared to audit the SDGs. And also we've provided them with advice and criteria that they can use.
Okay. Merci. En parlant des rapports.
Thank you. Talking about reports in the same context, certain previous reports from the Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development focused on 2 main issues, 2 main environmental issues. Of course, we understand that sustainable development covers more than just the environment. There's social and economic considerations and traditional considerations and others. How are you including these elements in the assessment reports from the Commissioner of Environment? And also, how is the Auditor General including these? You have 30 seconds.
Donc, je dirais que
well, we always work with the audit teams within the office to ensure that the sustainable development objectives are a primary consideration in terms of planning and audit selection. That applies to the Commissioner of the Environment and also the Auditor General. Thank you very much. So now we're going to give the floor to Madame Posey, please. Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for being here. It's very interesting to have you here with us. I know that often you receive requests and there's various deadlines, and sometimes you have a lack of power. But if we look to report number 2 on the progress that's been made by departments and agencies in setting up sustainable development strategies, from the auditor on page 7, we say that there's 2 of the 10 measures about air quality that have not been addressed, even although we know And there's various Health Canada reports that several thousands of deaths each year because of air pollution. So could you tell us whether we should not spend more time on talking about this and creating links between the environment, health, and also these two measures related to air pollution? These two measures really need to be pushed ahead so that this takes place. Thank you. In our report, we have observed that there were targets and measures that were not included in the reports from the departments. There were 12 departments that were included in our audit, and there was a gap as regards the specific measures. It's important for all of the priorities to be included in the reports so that Canadians and parliamentarians are able to get a true snapshot of progress and the action being undertaken by our government. So we agree that there's a great deal of work still to be done. Now, you've said on page 12 of your document that you sent to us that the interesting criteria for the success of audits would be commitment or participation with stakeholders. So you select these stakeholders there. And 2019, the Environment Canada report did not cover the complete list of the non-tax subsidies granted to fossil fuel as was necessary in the audit, and there were certain subsidies from 23 organisations out of 200 that could have been covered. So do you not think that time has come now for the Auditor General to have more punch, more power to be able to carry out all of these audits? Well, I think it's a policy question. Our role is to carry out our audits and drop recommendations. And by doing that work, we give the information to the Parliament. And then it's the role of this committee and other committees to then have an influence on progress being made. Well, what I find rather difficult is you've said that everyone has to be committed and participate, but with Transport Canada that we mentioned earlier, and we were talking about fossil fuel subsidies, there doesn't seem to be this commitment on both sides. And that's what I am actually regretting. I think that this question comes up in certain situations. We see it with biodiversity as well. Namely, I think that it's important for the departments and agencies to really commit with confidence to the matters that are covered in their mandate. But to come back to this again, you've said that the MPs can do something, but we need to get these tools. We need to get these figures. To give you another example, when Madam Gelfin, in her last report, she said that the government should make the definition stricter and inefficient when talking about fossil fuel subsidies because it was vague. There was the increase to fossil fuel subsidies. It hadn't been reduced or been stabilized. It actually been increased. So if we respect your institutions, could we not actually have some follow-up actions that would be stricter? Hasn't the time now come to actually demand a response? I can give you an example. The Public Accounts Standing Committee uses reports and asks for action plans from departments. I think that's a good practice because they are forcing the departments then to respect timelines, and it gives an opportunity to have follow-up in the committee. In our office, we do follow-up reports now and again, But in the last 10 years, this has not been a big priority for us because of the other subjects that we've had to actually audit as well. So from what I'm reading, it seems that there's a lack of collaboration between the departments. And so my next question will go on to that. How much time do I have left? About 10 seconds, I'm afraid. Perhaps Mr. Hayes could answer your question in the next round. Yes, I think that's what we'll do then. Thank you. So now we'll go on to Madam Collins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to our guests, our witnesses today. Looking at the past 4 years, from 2016 through 2019, the Environment Commissioner's Office was averaging about almost 5 environmental audits, 4.75 each year. But now in 2020, we've got 1 environmental audit report. We have only 2 planned for 2021. I'm not including in these numbers the required departmental reports on the SDGs or the annual reports on petitions, and I'm not including the natural health products, which doesn't seem to be an environmental audit. I'm just talking about actual environmental auditing work. So it seems like we're doing way less than what we used to do, and it seems particularly alarming given the climate crisis we're facing, the biodiversity crisis, the threats to fresh water, to environment, and to human health. And so I'm curious about your plans for strengthening the office of the Commissioner of Environment to allow this office to do the important environmental audit work that Parliament and Canadians have come to rely on.
Thank you very much for that question. So I would say that your question raises two important points. The first relates to the audit work that we have done historically. I would say that for the large majority of the mandate of the commissioner since 1995, the environmental audits have been the focal point. I think over the last number of years, we have done more sustainable development audits than we had in the prior years. The mandate that we do have relates to both the environment and sustainable development. So we have tried to find that balance. But the other angle that your question raises is one that relates directly to our financing, our funding as the Office of the Auditor General. As Ms. Hogan mentioned in her opening remarks, the work that is done for the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development is part of our performance audit practice. It's the same practice in our office that supports the work of the Auditor General. And because of our funding and resourcing challenges, we have had to reduce the performance audit practices work over the years.
Mr. Hayes, I'm just going to interrupt you. So it sounds like you are under-resourced, need more funding to do the important environmental auditing work that Canadians rely on. I have another question for Ms. Hogan, and the interim commissioner was appointed in July 2019, well over a year ago. It's good to hear you'll be finally starting the selection process by November 30th. I'm curious about who you're consulting on this, and specifically, have you met with leaders from any of Canada's environmental organizations?
So you are correct. We launched the countrywide search for the new Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development at the end of October. What we have done so far to
and sorry, just because I have very limited time, I'm just curious, have you met with leaders of any Canada's environmental organizations?
I personally have not yet. They have communicated with me, and we are reaching out through our professional networks to make sure that people know we're searching.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. If you haven't met with any of these leaders from Canada's environmental movements, I'm worried that the Officer of the Auditor General doesn't have the expertise it needs to support the Commissioner of the Environment to do the important and specialized work of environmental audits. And I understand that there is a specialized group called the Commissioners Group in the Environment Commissioner's Office. Can you tell me about the status of the Commissioners Group right now? How many people are on it and what are their roles?
Excuse me, this doesn't eat into your time, but Ms. Hogan, I'm told that you might want to bring the mic closer to you when you're speaking.
All right, hopefully this is better.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier on, while we do have a group that we call a commissioners group, it is more of an administrative function because of who they report to within our organization structure. Our performance audit practice has specialists from all fields.
For sure. Yeah, I'm particularly concerned and wondering about the commissioners group right now. How many people are on it and what are their roles?
So I couldn't really tell you how many people are on a particular team because, as I said, we don't have people who are designated within a group. We do have auditors who spend a good amount of their time working on performance audits that are issued under the banner of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, but it's not a group. We are one group, one happy family of auditors. It's just some have specialties and spend a lot.
Thank you so much. And I have just such limited time. I just want to get to all my questions. And from what you're saying, it sounds like this group doesn't totally exist anymore. And from what I've heard, the group did exist. And from what you're describing, it sounds like in some ways this group may have been abolished.
No, not at all. Actually, the group was not abolished. What we're doing is we're taking the skills and specialties of people like Ms. Leach and Mr. McKenzie who are here today and spreading them out across our work when we want to have sustainable development goals addressed in all of our work.
So just, I understand that there's a lot of work going on, but Parliament has explicitly recognized that we are also facing a national environmental emergency and that this kind of environmental auditing is very important. I think that by the logic that it needs to be more integrated, if you were to merge Environment Canada with NRCan, you'd risk subordinating environmental concerns to economic ones. So it's concerning to hear that this group is no longer existing as it used to.
Time is up, unfortunately, but
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The witnesses can always come back and provide answers and comments to previously asked questions. So we'll go to the second round now, which is the 5-minute and 2.5-minute round. We'll start with Mr. Généraux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations again to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayes and Ms. Hogan, thanks for joining us here today and your teams. Mr. Hayes, question for you. Were you recently consulted on the government's announcement of plastic toxicity labeling?
No, I wasn't.
How about, were you consulted on the clean fuel standards?
No, we weren't. I will just maybe say that that our role as an auditor can involve being consulted up front, but that's really the prerogative of the department. We can sometimes do and do look into design when we know about things in advance.
Great, thank you. So it says as part of your mandate here, the Commissioner provides parliamentarians with analysis and recommendations on the federal government's efforts to protect the environment and foster sustainable development. Do you think it would have been helpful to have conversations with you ahead of time?
I'll use as an example the consultation that was built into the Federal Sustainable Development Act and the Federal Sustainable Development Strategy as an example. We did provide advice when consulted before that was put into place, and I believe that our recommendations were of value to the government when they did receive them. So we are an information point. We are a place that would like to be able to be helpful early on, as well as in the work that we do after.
It sounds like a long yes, Mr. Commissioner. I think I agree. I think it would be helpful to consult you up in advance of some of these announcements. Would you agree that it's vital to be able to properly assess targets and priorities in order to know whether government policies are in fact producing results and what will protect the environment?
So I do agree that that it is important to assess targets and performance measures. What you measure is going to drive what you achieve. So it is important to know that you have the right measures and targets in place early on before it's too late.
And has the government acknowledged the issues you've outlined in your report?
So in general, for the commissioner's reports, we've had agreement on the facts and the presentation of the information in the reports and to the recommendations, and typically the departments do respond with actions that they will take in response to our recommendations.
And so have they then demonstrated a willingness to amend the draft in order to properly assess all government priorities and targets to ensure transparency?
I'm not sure that I could say on a blanket level like that we've received that sort of reaction, but I do believe that in response to our recommendations, there have typically been agreement and efforts to respond.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That's all the questions I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Mr. Longfield. Mr. Longfield.
Thank you, and it's great to see you, Ms. Hogan and Mr. Hayes. We're in the Environment Committee. Sometimes we see each other, most of the times we see each other in public accounts, and thank you for all the time you're spending with all of our committees and informing us about your great work. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow about the defense audit that was done. And it is good, as I was reading through report number 2, to see how you are integrating the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. Sustainable Development Goal 3 of good health and well-being. Of course, environment sustainable goals are important, as are economic, but social goals are also extremely important in terms of sustainability. I wonder if you could comment, maybe Mr. Hayes or Ms. Hogan, on how the federal sustainable development strategy is getting integrated into your work across departments.
So I'll start with that. The Federal Sustainable Development Strategy provides a number of commitments and targets that we use from time to time as criteria for our work. I mentioned earlier the Sustainable Development Goals. Those are being used broadly across the office, not just in our performance audit practice, but also in our special examination work of Crown corporations. We are looking for the places where we can use the Sustainable Development Goals to analyze what's going on in Crown corporations and government departments. So I would say that you can expect to see mention of the Sustainable Development Goals on a very regular basis in most of our products.
So if I could just add, Mr. Longfield, we are already incorporating the Sustainable Development Goals into our work, but we can and we should be doing a better job, and that is exactly our goal. Regardless of how we decide to structure or set ourselves up to manage our people, doesn't mean that we're taking away importance on them. In fact, we're expanding the scope and knowledge of them, thus increasing the importance of Sustainable Development Goals within our work.
Great, thank you. And as I read the recommendations, the 12 departments that were audited were in agreement that they're also trying to get up to speed. I don't think it was a gotcha moment. It was more, we are transitioning the way that we operate as a government and focusing on sustainability on all the goals that we're working together. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think that in response to the recommendations, the departments did agree, and what was probably most important for me was the agreement that comprehensive reporting and integration of all of the targets and measures should happen so that nothing is missed.
So in terms of the integration within the Office of the Auditor General, and the skill sets that are transferred between audits and even within audits. Could you talk about how this is evolving over time, where we're at? Where do you see the Office of the Auditor General and the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development working together or working separately?
Maybe if I could start with this and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Hogan. It's important to recognize that there was a policy decision made very early on with the way that the Act was set up, that the Commissioner is not a standalone office. The Commissioner supports the Office of the Auditor General, and there has been discussion over the years about whether or not a Commissioner should be a standalone Commissioner or not. But the way that we're structured, the Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development is a senior officer appointed by the Auditor General to assist her with her mandate. It should be noted that really the mandate belongs to the Auditor General. The Commissioner assists her. Ms. Hogan?
When it comes to the kind of expertise that we have within the office, I mean, we have CPAs, lawyers, economists, environmentalists, engineers. There's so many. We do have a pocket of rich experience and knowledge about the environment and sustainable development area, and we're trying to make sure that we broaden that and expand it. When we feel that we don't have that expertise, we do hire it in order to support us in the audits that we do. Right now, with our funding pressures, we did, as we said earlier, had to make choices to narrow all of our discretionary work, which impacted both audits issued under the Auditor General's banner, as I said earlier, and those under the Commissioner of the Environment. So they both just were impacted by some of our pressures.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
so much.
Longfield. No, we're right on 5 minutes, unfortunately, but we'll get back to you for sure. Madame Posé, à vous la parole.
Madame Posé, you have the floor. Thank you. We recognize that coordination is important, harmonization between the two departments, employment and social development, and the environment department. But why has this been divided in two? Would it not have been simpler for it to be one single department, i.e. the environment department dealing with this? This is a subject that I raised in a perspective that I submitted in 2019. I believe that there are problems of coordination when we have two departments that are trying to resolve the same matter. The Environment and Climate Change Department has an office within this department that works on the Sustainable Development Strategy at a federal level. There's a group within Employment and Social Development Canada that works on the Sustainable Development Objectives and Strategy, and this division causes confusion. Yes, indeed. I only have 2.5 minutes, but I have really seen that this is what you have raised as well, this lack of coordination. So who can resolve that? Because you're the ones who have the experts, if I've correctly understood. Well, I would say that it would be more efficient if there was one central agency that had the responsibility for working on the Sustainable Development Objectives, because these departments do not have the mandate to have an influence on other departments or direct the other departments. Yes, as it's your role, you have access to the other departments, don't you? Yes, we have access to all departments. And the harmonization plan, Ms. Hogan referred to that. Is it being drawn up? Or what's happening with this agency? Where are we at in terms of this harmonization or alignment process? 15 seconds. Are you referring to harmonization within our office? No, between the two departments that work on the Environment Department and also the ESDC. Mr. Hayes, I'm not aware of that. Perhaps you've got something to add? Well, I think I can only say that the two departments are aware of the relationship between the federal strategy and the SDGs. But I think there is confusion there. Thank you, Madam Collins, now, please.
Mr. Chair, I want to follow up on the question, but this time to Mr. Hayes, just about the commissioners group. I know that you were hired in July and that the former Environment Commissioner didn't leave until September. My understanding that under the previous Environment Commissioner, that the Environment or the commissioners group was an actual group. I'm curious if you can describe to me the status of that group right now, how it's changed since then.
So I'll go back to 2015, because that's when I started with the commissioner, supporting the commissioner with audits as a principal. There were three leaders of the performance audit practice at that time, two assistant auditors general and the commissioner of the environment and sustainable development. Together, they led the performance audit practice. So
if you could be very concise just about the commissioners group.
Well, so I guess what I'm trying to suggest is that the commissioner was a partner with two other assistant auditors general in managing the performance audit practice.
And the staff, I'm curious. We've talked a little bit about structure, expanding the Auditor General said expanding the scope and mandate, and I'm really curious about the need for specific, specialized skills, scientific, technological, economic, and policy skills. I've seen recent job postings from the Office of the Auditor General explicitly seeking candidates with expertise, including IT, economics. In contrast, there does not appear to be any explicitly job postings seeking recruitment of environmental experts for several years. Are there plans to hire more environmental experts?
I would say that there are. At this point, we are hoping and confident that we will receive additional funding. This is something that we have received support from Parliament. But yes, I would say
Thank you. I just have 30 seconds left. And so I just want to note that over the past years, as the Environment Commissioner mentioned, MPs of all stripes have noted their appreciation for the role of the Commissioner. And David McGuinty put forward a motion asking the government to make the Commissioner a full and independent agent of Parliament. So I have submitted a motion, a notice of motion, and at the agreed time, or at the time, Mr. Scarpaleggia, the chair, actually supported this motion. It's the same one that David McGuinty put forward. And I'm hoping that I will find support once folks have a chance to read it over.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. We'll go to Mr. Redekop for 5 minutes, please.
I believe Mr. Godin is going to go first, and I'll take the last round.
Sorry, it got reversed from the order I was given originally, but yes, Mr. Godin, please.
Mr. Godin, thank you. I'd like to congratulate you, and please learn my name off by heart. Now, Madam Auditor General and Commissioner of the Environment, thank you for undergoing this exercise with us. In your opening remarks, Madam Auditor General, you said that the Departmental Federal Sustainable Strategy looks at the implementation of programs, and you have affirmed that at the moment there are 70 organizations, federal organizations that are under examination, and in 43 days, including weekends and statutory holidays, there'll be another 30. So can you explain what's going to happen in the 43 days to go up from 30 organizations that are being examined? Thank you. What are we going to do to be able to audit more organizations? Is that what you're getting at? Yes, you have affirmed that up until now, there are 70 federal organizations that have been audited, and in December 2020, almost 100 organizations will be examined. So what's going to happen in the next 43 days so you'll be able to attain this objective of 100 organizations? When we have mandates that are enacted in legislation, we organize ourselves to make sure that we can deliver on our mandate. And that's what you'll see in our organization with the reduction in performance audits. All the financial side is stipulated in legislation, so we organize ourselves to make sure that we can deliver on our mandate, which is not a discretionary one. So we will organize ourselves as we've always done to do this. Now, as far as I know, and also for the other members of the committee, how many federal organizations are there in total? Is that a lot or not many? If we've got 5,000, then 100 is not such a high ratio, but how many federal organizations are there in total? If we talk about departments and agencies, I think there's around 100, 101, in fact. And everyone is subject to an audit. Thank you, I've understood. Coming on now to my second question. You have stated in report number 2 this fall that it's difficult for parliamentarians in the Canadian population to have a clear idea of the overall progress accomplished vis-à-vis the goals, and I agree with your comments, and the organisation have not mentioned clear elements as to what they wanted to attain in terms of performance and targets. Could you give us certain means as parliamentarians, because I come up with the same conclusion. The current government has been in power for 5 years, and there's no measures to ensure that we can actually assess what they've done or where we're heading. There are good intentions, but there's no actions and concrete plans set up to attain these goals. So what would be your advice to us as parliamentarians so that we can ask for the correct performance assessment tools? Are you talking in general or related specifically to sustainable development? Well, I'm talking more about sustainable development. And what I can see in the report here is report number 2, progress made by the departments in the implementation of sustainable development strategies. So perhaps it's Mr. Hayes who should answer that question. Thank you. I would say that the action plans that I mentioned earlier are a good tool for the committee. And this is a regular comment that the Auditor General, the former Auditor General, made, and no doubt we'll see this in the future, is the quality of information, which is important when we get this from the departments, so that we can then give good reports and good advice to Parliament, so that in turn you can do the necessary follow-up with the departments. Now, you have affirmed, Mr. Hayes, that there will not be a report for 2022 on climate change. Now, if we think climate change is a real issue, and if climate change is a real priority, then I imagine that there should be studies to see whether we're heading towards a brick wall or are we implementing measures so that we can have a positive impact and reduce our environmental footprint and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Waiting for 2022 to assess what we're doing, well, as I've said, the government has been in power for 5 years, and it'll be 8 years by 2022. Hoping for them that there will not be any election in the meantime or that they'll win the next elections. That's not my desire. But in any case, that would mean that the government has been in power for 8 years if we wait until 2022. So would it not be better to have assessment measures and performance measures set up now to be aware of the current situation and to be able to monitor this so that we can react? Unfortunately, time has run out, Mr. Godin. We can come back to your question later. Chairman, I'd just like to say that my question has been put. Would it be possible to get a brief answer from the Commissioner? Unfortunately, no, because you've taken 5.5 minutes with your question, but we will come back to this. You will have your turn again in a few moments, and Mr. Hayes will be able to answer then. So now, Mr. Sini, you have the floor.
And congratulations again on your selection as the chair of this committee. I want to thank Mr. Hayes and Ms. Hogan and the rest of the team for coming here today. One of the themes that has emerged through this meeting has been the Sustainable Development Goals. And I would like to focus on one because this one, I think, checks off a lot of boxes that would be very effective in helping the government and the country meet its climate goals. And of particular interest to me is goal 12.3, which deals with food loss and waste and calls on nations to commit to reducing their food waste by 50% by 2030. Now, I know that you are going to be doing a report mid-next year looking at the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. I'm wondering, are you currently thinking about this area at all, or is this an interest for the auditor to look at this aspect of the sustainable development goal?
I would say that yes, it is. It's an area of interest for us. The audit that we are planning to report in spring 2021 is about the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. I might pass it over to Kim Leach, who is the principal responsible for that audit, just maybe to expand a bit.
Yes, thank you for the question. And very quickly, that subject, we are doing an audit on protecting Canada's food supply, and that it will be as part of our suite of COVID audits, and that is targeted for tabling in the fall of 2021. And in that audit, we are looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and the targets that you've referred to.
The other follow-up question I have is that if you're going to be doing that, are you collecting data, and how are you collecting that data?
Kim, would you like to take that?
Sure. So what we've done what we're looking at in the food supply audit is we've identified 5 different programs that the government has implemented as a result of the pandemic suite of spending, and we're looking at the extent to which those programs are, how are they designed, and how are they delivering their programs, and what are the results of these programs, and are they achieving their results. And some of them are designed to get food, for example, to vulnerable populations. So we're looking at the extent to which, and we're talking with StatsCan, who collects information on food supply, and it's supplied to vulnerable populations. They have disaggregated data to some extent. So yes, we are looking at various aspects of the food supply system.
Now, going forward, I'm assuming that you said you're going to be looking at 5 areas basically. But as we get closer to 2030, there are going to be certain areas where we are ahead. There might be certain areas we're facing challenges. Will you be doing further audits on specific SDG goals, or will these audits always be on the broader thematic of SDG goals?
So as we mentioned, we are incorporating the SDGs and the targets that are supporting them in our audits across the office. So we will most likely be including many SDGs that are doing well and many SDGs that may be in need of improvement in our country.
Well, one of the things that has emerged at the United Nations in terms of food loss is to be setting standards where things can be measured, either food loss indexes or food waste indexes. And I'm just wondering, is there any thought to, I'm thankful that you're doing the audit, because I think this is a topic that could really be helpful in multiple areas of our society. But is there any way that you are thinking about developing a standard which can be measured going forward?
So that would be the responsibility of the departments. We would evaluate how they set those standards and whether or not they took into consideration all of the relevant factors in reaching.
But do you think that's a good idea to have a standard so that there can be a possible measurement as you're accumulating data? Because one of the problems in this area is the data collection is very weak. In not necessarily in Canada, but I mean worldwide. And there's a very difficult way of quantifying how much exactly food is wasted and how much is actually lost. So is that something that you would recommend to the government, to come up with standards and a way of collecting that data to make sure that we have some parameters to measure by?
30 seconds, please.
Yeah, we are always in favor and supporting better measures, better methods to collect information and to be able to measure progress. It becomes very difficult to report on progress achieved when the measures or the targets that are set are not specific or measurable, attainable, results based or time oriented. So we do encourage departments and agencies to set standards.
Thank you very much. We'll move now to Mr. Redekop for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Just confirming, is it not the block next?
No, I have. Sorry, just a moment, please. Yeah, no, it's yourself, Mr. Redekop.
Okay, perfect. Thank you to the witnesses for today for coming, and congratulations to the new chair. Just want to follow up on Mr. Godin's last question, Mr. Hayes. Could you please provide a written response to his question as we ran out of time to get the answer? If you could provide that to the committee, that would be great.
Would be happy to.
Thank you. Auditor General, I'd like to ask you a question about program auditing. My background is in business, and I was a professional accountant. Of course, I was used to preparing and auditing financial statements in a business environment. Program auditing is obviously different, as you're looking at more than just money. You're looking at the effectiveness of programming, et cetera. In the estimates, there are many cross-departmental programs or horizontal items. Basically, Finance Canada and the Treasury Board earmark money to one department, and then like Environment Canada, for example, for planting trees. And then the Environment Department transfers that money to Natural Resources to deliver the program. It's basically a financial shell game that allows ministers to abandon responsibility for money and programming in their departments. 2 weeks ago at this committee, Minister Wilkinson said, as you know, most of the tree planting activity is a natural resources related function. The minister's mandate letter from the Prime Minister says the Minister of the Environment is to operationalize the plan to plant 2 billion incremental trees over the next 10 years. So when ministers such as Minister Wilkinson refuse to take responsibility for programs they are mandated with, and responsible for under the voted estimates. Do you find from a program auditing perspective that these are the types of programs that are destined to fail?
The government is definitely moving in a direction where there is a lot of cross organizational push for programs to be delivered in such a fashion. I think the challenge from an audit perspective is that just adds some complexities, as you can likely appreciate to an audit. I don't believe that setup, personally, I don't believe it would result in a program failure. It just means it takes more coordination and collaboration amongst parties. And when it comes time to audit, it means that we need to scope in additional departments and make sure that roles and responsibilities are clear and that accountability is there. So I just see it as an opportunity, and it's an area definitely that I would like to see us focus in on. Our audits need to be aligned with how the government organizes itself to deliver programs. And so I would like to see us spend a little bit more time doing that, as well as perhaps doing some collaborative work between ourselves and the territories so that we can see the federal, provincial, or federal territorial link to some programs. So it's definitely things that's on my horizon during my mandate.
Yeah, I can understand how that would make life much more difficult for you. And does it frustrate you as the Auditor General when the Liberals make promises, for example, to better our environment, when they clearly don't have a plan to properly measure, monitor, and report on these programs?
Well, as we've mentioned, it's always a good recommendation to make sure that when you launch a program that you've thought about how you're going to measure its successes. And when we see that missing in a program design, we take the opportunity to recommend that. Every good plan you measure. Or you achieve what you measure. And so every good plan should have some good performance indicators and good measurements to make sure that you know when you're achieving your intended result.
Thank you. For the Environment Commissioner, you appeared in March at this committee and reported that the government is not adequately prepared for some of its commitments on the environment. In particular, I believe you said they had no implementation plan with a system to measure, monitor, and report on progress nationally. The government announced new targets in September's throne speech for planting trees as well as the protection of terrestrial and aquatic areas. If they cannot, in your words, measure, monitor, and report, what is your expectation for these programs to succeed?
So that would be exactly what we would go into audit. We would use the criteria that the government has set for itself, the expectations it's set, and we would hold them to those very criteria. We would report on the progress that they reach. We would obviously base our reports on exactly what we see in doing our work.
But how can you audit a program when there's poor measurements and poor reporting, poor monitoring?
In those cases, we generally report to Parliament the weaknesses in the measurement and reporting. We bring that forward so that, and we will make recommendations for improvement.
So in the case of a project like the tree planting, what are some examples of best practices for measurements that could be used in a case like that?
So I'm not actually familiar with the best practices. That would be something that we would look at when we are designing our audit. We would look for other jurisdictions and the way that they do the measurement and reporting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Redekop. Mr. Baker, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations on your election. And thank you all for joining us today to speak with the committee. First clarification, I first wanted to make a clarification about something that was just being discussed. My understanding is that the tree planting program is actually led by Natural Resources Canada and not the Ministry of the Environment. I think that's important context to have in the context of the discussion we were just having. My first question is to you, Mr. Hayes, and it's in regards to the role that you play. And I'm wondering if, for the sake of my constituents who are watching this in Etobicoke Centre or who will be reading the transcript of this, could you just share, in a minute or so, what is the importance of the role that you play, and what impact have you had, or your office had?
So I believe that the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, the way that it's structured within the Office of the Auditor General, provides a really important assurance to Parliament in the form of audit reports. We are able to use the entire mechanism that is in place for the Auditor General, which is clearly given Parliament credible and reliable reports for decades, we are able to use exactly that same process to support the accountability role that Parliament plays in the areas of environment and sustainable development.
And why does that, just to take it a step further, so why does that matter in the work we're doing to protect the environment or to fight climate change? I'm just thinking about this from the perspective of a constituent who might be watching this. Why do those audits matter?
So the work that we do provides independent information to Parliament. We are not advocates. We have a responsibility to be independent. So when we come forward with reports such as the one that we provided on the transportation of dangerous goods recently, which bring forward areas for improvement that the departments can make that will have a direct impact on the safety and health of Canadians, that I can't think of a more important role. And that can be expanded to every audit that we do, whether it's climate change, where we're encouraging the government to take steps to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to the effects of climate change, or to biodiversity, where we are encouraging the government to follow through on the commitments that it has made, and measuring and reporting on the progress that it has made where it has.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. My next question is for Ms. Hogan. Ms. Hogan, could you speak to the importance of having environmental and sustainable development expertise involved across your audits?
Well, one of the sustainable development goals, I believe it's Sustainable Development Goal 16, which talks about good, accountable institutions. This gives us an opportunity to take a bit of that expertise and make sure it's everywhere. Every audit that we do, whether it be a financial audit or a special examination or a performance audit, should be able to identify which sustainable development goal our work is touching, and then be able to comment on whether or not the organizations are helping move that yardstick to improve the country. I mean, sustainable development goals connect with so many important issues that are relevant to all Canadians, and we have an opportunity as an entire organization to be able to help the government stay focused on improving in that area.
Thank you. Chair, how much time do I have left?
You have about 1 minute and 10 seconds.
10 seconds, perfect. So in an earlier discussion, Ms. Hogan, you were having with Ms. Collins, there was a discussion about reallocation of people within your organization. And I'm just wondering if you could take the remaining time and talk about how they were reallocated and how that allows environmental and sustainable development issues to be addressed and audited in all your audits.
Thank you. I don't think that we've really reallocated our people. We have just sat down and taken a much more global view to our audit practices, period, and ensured that we have the right people in the right place. That's a decision everyone should be looking at when they run an organization, but one that's forced upon you when you have some constraints related to your staffing. And so you recognize that you need to use your people in the best way possible. And so our performance auditors, some have a huge knowledge, as I said, and huge expertise in this area. They are still focusing in on that work, but they're also being able to share that knowledge and increase it across our organization.
Thank you. Thanks very much. De retour à Madame Posé.
And now back to Madame Posé, please. Thank you. Audits are important for MPs so that we can do our work. But sometimes the reports from the Office of the Auditor General come to the committees, but those from the Commission of Environment and Sustainable Development, they don't come to the committee first. So if they could perhaps be submitted, or if we could have some sort of draft report and then they could be tabled with the Office of the Auditor General, would that be a possible solution? Because as a committee, we could bring forward ideas or our concerns, for example. I think that you're tackling a subject that deals with the selection of the mandate or how we choose the subjects for audits. We're always interested to know what parliamentarians are interested in seeing explored, and that's another reference point when we choose the areas that we're going to audit. No, you were talking more about the tabling of our reports. All of our reports go to the Public Accounts Standing Committee. That's the way in which we're organised. But any committee in the Parliament could invite us to come before them, and we'd be very happy to talk about our work. Thank you. I'd like to come back to another question that I put at the very outset, to come back to the final report from Madame Gelfin when she was talking about the fossil fuel subsidies and the fact it was rather vague. And we can see that the departments have not acted because there's been an increase in these fossil fuel subsidies. Now, you represent honourable institutions. So is it not time for you to have the power to actually demand that there's follow-up when there's this type of report that comes out from the Commissioner, which is tabled, and then nothing happens with it? As Mr. Hayes has already said, in the Permanent Committee on Public Accounts, they demand an action plan, and we encourage each department to respond to the recommendations that we bring out in a report. And we recommend to each department that they should draw up an action plan afterwards. As the Environment Committee, I would encourage you, if you want to use our reports that come from the Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development, then you can also invite along the departments together with us to study the report and ask them. Sorry, I'm afraid time has run out. Thank you very much for that answer. And now I turn to Ms. Collins, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. First, just a quick yes or no question. Ms. Hogan, you had mentioned that you hadn't met with any leaders from Canada's environmental organizations yet. I'm just curious, are you committed to meeting with some of them before the selection process happens?
I have received communication from them. I am committed to, if I don't find a good caliber candidate in the current search that I'm doing, to expand that to use perhaps the services of a headhunter if I need to. And I do invite them to reach out to our office if they would like to make some recommendations for us as we do this very important search for a new commissioner.
So it sounds like you're not willing to meet with the people who are reaching out to you about this hiring process?
Well, no one's asked me specifically to meet with me about the process, but I have received letters about them inquiring when I would start the process, and I did write them back to let them know that we started that on October 23rd.
Oh, great. So you would be willing if people are wanting to meet with you about the selection of the new Environment Commissioner?
I'm always very interested in meeting with stakeholders who are interested in our work, and I would love to see increased community engagement.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hogan. I just have such a limited time. 3 audits were paused in early 2020. When do you plan on restarting these audits, and what are the planned dates for completion?
So in terms of the audits that have been, they were delayed because of a number of factors relating to COVID. We do expect to report on the audits in 2021, in particular, natural health products and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in the spring, and the audit on water basins in the fall.
And so, Mr. Hayes, you had mentioned the limited budget, and I am concerned that the Liberal government isn't providing adequate resources for the Environment Commissioner to do their important work, especially given the reduction in the amount of environmental audits compared to the last 4 years. And it does sound to me, given what Ms. Hogan had said about finding the right place for the right people, and that these environmental auditors are now sharing that knowledge, doing other audits. I'm just curious, kind of your take. I've put forward a motion to make the role of the Environment Commissioner, to make them an independent agent of Parliament. I'm curious what the difference would be in the work specifically for environmental audits and for budgeting.
Very, very briefly, please.
Yes, so I would say that the political decision to carve off the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development would mean that agent of Parliament, if that motion was to be passed, would have to also set up an office and have their own staff. They would end up making all the decisions, and that their funding would be set for specifically that purpose. It would be a marked departure from the system that we have right now.
Okay, a couple of things. We now go back to the Conservatives, and I'm assuming that we keep the same order as previously. That's number one. Number two, it's 5:30, and I'm wondering if the committee would be open. Well, the first question is, would the committee be open to continuing until 6? And the second question is, would the witnesses be available to stay till 6? So maybe we could find out first if the committee wishes to continue till 6. Is Mr. Albus here? Sorry, I'm not following. Is Mr. I think you're on mute, Mr. Albus. No, can't hear you, unfortunately. No. Is it a muting issue?
No, he's not muted.
For some reason, it's not coming through.
Try unplugging your headset completely.
No.
Quietest I've ever heard Dan.
No,
okay.
There we go.
There he goes.
Okay, good.
Okay, because I did unplug it once already. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have members that have been at these meetings all day. I do recognize, though, that there are some other members that want, to ask questions. Maybe if the chair could just canvass, and if we all were to just say, if each member had 2 minutes, to ask their questions, if that would be fair, because we have to respect the members that, have been working all day at the same time have made other appointments.
So you're suggesting that each member of the committee get 2 minutes, or?
Well, I'm just saying maybe you canvass and see who's actually interested. If they raise their hand that they would prefer another 2 minutes, and then if it gets to be where everyone's going to ask questions, then maybe we'll just continue with a regular round. But I think there may only be 1 or 2 members. And
okay, so I assume no one on the Conservative side wants to ask a question at this point. Is that what you're saying?
I think everyone on my side is fine.
Okay, Ms. Collins, do you have more questions? Madame Posey, est-ce que...
Madame Posey, do you have other questions? No? No. There is a motion, in fact, that I would like to table. And on the Liberal side, are there any other questions for Mr. Saini? No. Do you have other questions? No. I can't see any, so Madam Collins, would you like to take 2.5 minutes then?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Ms. Hogan, we'd been talking before about how the job that the Office of the Auditor General does and the Commissioner for Environment and Sustainable Development is really to assess the risks to Canadians, to focus on the most important of those risks and then audit the federal government's response to them. But assessing environmental risk requires unique experience and expertise in the field that those audits are occurring. And so from what I've heard you say, that it's not necessarily a real allocation, but many of those performance auditors are working on other audits, sharing their knowledge. It sounds like there have been less environmental audits happening over the past year in comparison with the 4 years before. I'm just curious how you see this expertise being used within the office, and if in fact there hasn't been hires or even recruitment for environmental experts, how that environmental expertise is occurring in your office.
So we do have a lot of environmental expertise within our office. We have individuals like Ms. Leach, who's here, who's been with the office and working in the environment for most of her career, so decades. We have a lot of incredible individuals who have tons and tons of years of experience. Where we feel that we have a gap, we will absolutely hire that expertise. As we hopefully will be successful in getting additional funding, as we embark on increasing our capacity and rebuilding our performance audit practice, that includes performance auditors who will issue and work on things under the Commissioner of the Environment's banner. We will hire all across, so we will make sure that we.
So, Ms. Hogan, thank you so much. That's helpful. And I hear that you'll recruit staff across all backgrounds, but specifically, I'm wanting to hear a commitment that you're going to be recruiting staff with strong environmental backgrounds.
Absolutely. We need experts in all fields that
we
plan on auditing.
Thank you so much.
If we can't find them, we'll get them through contracts.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much to the witnesses and to the members for your good questions. I believe Madame Posé would like to table a motion. Is that correct?
Oui, merci.
Yes, Chair. I'm going to announce it. I know that I need to send it to the clerk, but following on from one of the answers from Ms. Hogan, I would like the committee to ask to the Department of Transport to come and spend time with us in the committee so that we can look at the follow-up on the recommendations from 2011, because there was an overwhelming report and nothing has happened in the last 9 years on that shocking report. And when we're talking about the transport of dangerous goods, we're talking about oil and gas and plastics and other substances. So perhaps it's up to the Environment Committee to get answers to our questions. Perfect. So you've tabled a motion in written form to the clerk. Yes, that's perfect. So before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I would like to recall to the members of the committee that soon we're going to start the study that was requested via the motion from Ms. Collins on Volkswagen under the Environmental Protection Act. And the clerk has informed me, or is asking me to ask you, to send in your witnesses that you would like to invite to the committee. And please send in that list before the end of the day on Monday, the 23rd of November. So we just wanted to invite you to send in your list of potential witnesses for Ms. Collins' study before the end of day, Monday, the 23rd of November. And if there's nothing else, then I would ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting. Yes, I would like to propose that motion, and I think that everyone so agrees. So I'll see you next time round.
Everyone, good meeting.
Merci.
Good chair.
Congratulations.